Hi, this is Bo Hudson, and we talk about all things voiceover here. And I am so thrilled to have this guest today. And I'm going to tell you why. If you're watching or listening to this right now, you know that a huge big thing just started to become technically fantastic, better than it ever has been, and that is AI. And all of us voiceover talents are just so worried that our voices are going to be stolen and used without our permission. So today I have a fantastic guest, Gordon Firemark. He's an entertainment attorney in Los Angeles, and we're going to be talking about this issue and a few others. Gordon Firemark, what a great name. You must be an actor too.
No, I've always been a behind the scenes. Well, up until recently, I was a behind the scenes guy. I actually got my start exposed to live theater, musical stage stuff when I was very little. And I sort of pursued that all the way into college, where I set out to be a theater major and then realized, well, they want you to act, and that wasn't going to be my thing. So I switched into radio, TV, and film.
But you have a fantastic voice too. Do you do
Thanks.
voiceover?
I have done some
I
voiceover.
bet.
Actually, my first job out of college was I was producing live sports coverage for a small cable sports channel, and we voiced our own promos and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you have a terrific voice.
well, thank
Well,
you.
what's happening is we didn't worry too much about AI and computer generated voices because they sounded really crappy. So
Mhm.
a lot of YouTube videos have this kind of voice, and they talk like that, and they run their words together.
Yeah.
But recently, the technology has improved so massively that that's no longer the case. And we did have one voiceover talent, Bev Standing, last year, had to sue TikTok because they took her voice and without her
Mhm.
permission, they used it on many, many, many videos, and she won.
Hers is that voice that you hear when people tell it
Well,
use an AI voice.
I think it was, but I
Yeah.
mean, she had that taken down. That was
Okay.
really a big deal. That was a
Mhm.
huge case, and she won. So have you in your practice encountered this before? And if so, how do you handle that sort of thing?
Well, so I should say I am an entertainment, media, and business lawyer. I do transactional work. I'm not a litigation lawyer. So
Okay.
I don't do cases. I hope to avoid cases for my
Right.
clients.
Right.
Uh, this is something that we've been talking about a little bit more recently. Actually, I remember probably 20 years ago, we were talking about the ability to using CGI to put an actor into a scene that he didn't actually appear in. We called that synthespians. And and even before that, there were cases involving sound-alike performances. Bette Midler, famously, one of her signature songs back in the 70s, had been misused um, when she refused to do a commercial, allow them to use her recording for a commercial. Ford Motor Company went and hired one of her backup singers to do a sound-alike recording, and she sued and won under California's right of publicity statute. So there is some law in place to help with these things. I'm interested to hear about Bev's case because I hadn't yet. Um, but yeah, there's some law. But the problem is, the sound of your voice isn't something that the law has historically provided a swath of legal protection for. Outside of that California statute I mentioned, it's pretty hard. So, yeah, unfortunately, I'm hearing a lot from voice actors as well as film actors and folks across other industries as well, that this is starting to become a problem, and they're losing jobs. And even if they're not losing the job, they may lose the opportunity because now the ad agency can find an AI.
Well, and one of the things that has developed is we voiceovers are often asked to do what's called sound alike
Mm-hmm.
voices for actors and
Yeah,
actresses, and
right.
now they don't really need us to do that anymore. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, if they want Meryl Streep for a film, I mean, of course, this wouldn't be done legally, but an example would be they wouldn't
Yeah.
need to find a sound alike like Meryl Streep. They could just take part of her, some work that she's done, and duplicate it any way they want,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
put it in the movie.
yeah, I do think that the Screen Actors Guild has, for a while, had some pretty strong protections against that kind of thing in their contracts. So if the studios had hired Merrill to be in the movie and then they needed to do an ADR session or overdub something or whatever, the contract says you have to hire Merrill. You can't go elsewhere for it. But
Yeah.
the challenge becomes when you never hired her in the first place. Where'd you get the voice sample? Where did you
Right.
get, and then the system that ingests it? And then, there's a lot of layers to this. And one of the big questions is, who do you sue?
Right. And one of the things that comes to my mind while we're talking right now, we've had several auditions for animated animation series, like Harry Potter, where they want like a Judi Dench sound alike,
Mm,
or let's see, who is the original person? I can't think of her name right now. Um, Judith Anderson, that sort of thing. And
yeah.
so we try to do that, but now they could take some Judi Dench
Mhm.
cuts and they wouldn't need us to do that.
That is true. And I mean, it's always been a sort of a practice that sound alike voice artists are out there. And, it's a fine line between when are you doing sort of straight voice sound alike work and when are you doing an impression? And then
So
it
what
becomes
should
comedy and parody and other things.
And I think what is upsetting, and what has even SAG-AFTRA is having panels about it.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of a big deal right now of what to do about this, because they can record your voice and use your
Mhm.
voice without you even knowing it.
Yeah.
So you may not even have a chance to sue them. They might be doing it, especially in other countries.
Yeah.
They could clone your voice and use it for wherever they wanted.
Yeah. I think the contracts that artists make with their employers is the first line of defense to provide some protection. And that means that when you contract, when your agent or your manager or you do your own deals, you need to say one time use only, and the masters, the raw material can't be republished or sold. The problem is, here we are, we're 10, 15, 20 years into the technology existence, and someone with a long career has put a lot of stuff on tape already. We're sort of closing the doors after the horses have left the barn.
Exactly. And we're everywhere. Our demos are on all different
Yeah.
websites, and we want that.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're all over the pay to play website. So it would be so easy to just
Mm-hmm.
grab someone's voice.
It is easy, and
Yeah.
in fact, I just as a thing to try it out myself, I used one of these 11 Labs. If anybody's not heard
Yes.
of it yet, I
Right.
used 11 Labs, and I actually just found some old clips of my voice, and I typed in the text of the Gettysburg. I cut and pasted the text of the
Yes.
Gettysburg
Right.
Address in, and there I was reading the Gettysburg Address.
Wow. Yes, exactly.
And
So when you meet with a client, because you're an entertainment lawyer,
yeah,
so I'm guessing what you do is tell us a little bit. Like if an voice actor comes to you and says, "I need some protection," what
yeah.
is it you do for them?
Well, what I do as in my work generally is I do contracts and business deals and setting up companies and those kinds of things, as well as the financing and production related stuff. So when I'm representing talent, my goal is to limit the scope of what can be done with that, of what they're expected to do for the dollars they're receiving, and what the scope of what can be done with it after the fact is. Now, look, the producers of a film, they need to have a little bit of flexibility to change a word if it's necessary, or because of the way something happened in a scene, maybe something was garbled and they want to be able to fix it. And should they have to hire the actor to come back and re-record, and that's a whole SAG day's work for 3 words or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
we sometimes negotiate around those issues, but building in as much protection as possible. And so when I meet with that client, I'm going to ask some questions. What is it that you're doing? What is important to you? I try not to make assumptions, although there are always some assumptions. We want to get the most money for the least work, and the best credits and positions and things like that. But this is one of these things where now we have to start thinking about it. Do we have the bargaining power to insist on destruction of the master tapes, um, or just putting those limits, and maybe even follow up payments if there is a reuse and those kinds of things. Everything is negotiable if you have some bargaining power, some clout. Unfortunately, most of the folks don't.
Do
Voice
you?
actors, even as
Yes.
prominent as your voice is, as well known as you may be, a lot of times they come at you and they say, we're just going to do a buyout. Here's the dollars. Are you in or you're out?
Yeah, that's become a very new problem also over the last several years
Yeah.
of the buyout situation, which is just such a stickler because people want to work, people want to make money, and are tempted to let them use it in any way they want.
And then you turn up and you do a recording session for some company, and maybe it's a big, I don't know, technology company or something, and they're asking you to do all the vowels and all the consonants 6 different ways from Sunday.
Yeah,
And the next thing you know, you're the voice of Siri.
right.
It
Well,
was a buyout, one
that
or
would be
two.
that would be great if it was a SAG after a contract and you were now the new voice of Siri. But the problem is, especially in other countries, if you do that AEIOU, every word in the dictionary, now they
Mhm.
have everything they want from you, and
Yeah.
they want to maybe pay you $500.
Yeah.
So it's becoming just it's bad.
Yeah.
So
I think we
when
just have to be wary about
we
these
have,
kinds of things.
it's a wild, wild west new world.
Yeah.
So do you walk hand in hand with an agent, so to speak, for a major voice talent?
You know, I should.
Okay.
Most of the time, the talent doesn't want to get a lawyer involved
Mm-hmm.
because it's extra, it's another mouth to feed,
Right.
essentially,
Yeah.
from what already fairly small compensation. So when they get big, when they're doing big jobs, then yes, either the talent or the agent will say, let's bring in legal just to double check or work on these kinds of things. But
Mm-hmm.
the agents are often I think, a little threatened when the lawyer comes
Mm.
in because are we going to queer the deal? Are we going to make a a mess of a relationship that agent has with that casting director or buyer or whatever?
Right.
And so there's this whole tightrope that we're walking.
Mm-hmm.
And but I would hope that we can build relationships that where we trust each other,
Mm-hmm.
and you can play the good cop bad cop game a little bit, and
So they
that
say
gets.
when you buy a new house, for instance, you should
Mhm.
always get an attorney involved. Would you say it's kind of the same thing in this day and age about with voiceover in some instances?
um Well, I mean, I think look, you're always going to be better protected by having consulted a lawyer about things. By the way, in some states, you don't need to have a lawyer for buying a house. Here in California, the realtor, the real estate broker, handles it,
Mm-hmm.
and you really know commercial stuff. They bring in lawyers, but on the residential, it's a one-off thing. And I think that agents in the entertainment industry think very much the same. Is that I've been doing this a long time. I know what to look for. I'm going to take care of it. And the thing is that the compensation structures for agents are a percentage of income, and so they're, let's close the deal. I want my money,
Mm-hmm.
and the lawyer's job is to sometimes say, bad deal, don't do it,
Mm-hmm.
and not be influenced by that. And not to say most agents are going to be unduly influenced that way, but
Right.
um, I think if you're the talent, think about your team. Do you have a manager and an agent and a lawyer? Or do you have a whole team, or is it one person? And is that one person telling you how it really is or how they want it to be?
Maybe
So,
you are brought in if something bad happens.
well,
Maybe that
absolutely. Or when there's a
when they
fear that
find out
something, yeah.
their voice has been used for something it shouldn't be and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, before we end, I know you do a lot of other things too.
hmm
You have all kinds of books, information for people that do what I do, people that do podcasts,
Yeah.
YouTube channels. Tell us a little bit about what you offer in those ways.
Well, they call me the podcast lawyer, and that is sort of the brand that I have adopted for myself these days. I've been doing film and television and theater kind of stuff, for most of my 30-year career, but I got into podcasting as a podcaster, as a host and producer. And when I went looking for the legal resources in that arena, I discovered that there were none. This was
Mm.
14, 15 years ago.
Hmm.
So I sat down and I wrote a book. I did the research and found the stuff and wrote a book, and it's an ebook called The Podcast Blog and New Media Producers Legal Survival Guide. It's a mouthful, but just go to
Hmm.
podcastlawbook.com and you
Okay.
can get a copy of that. It's a little long in the tooth, but the laws haven't changed dramatically since then. And I really am on a mission to educate and inform and provide um, creative people with the tools they need to do their thing and avoid the pitfalls and not have to call a lawyer because there's trouble.
Well, let
So
me ask you an important question,
sure.
if you don't mind answering. Let's talk about podcasts for just a
Mhm.
second. What can you tell us about copyright and is it fair use?
Yeah,
I complicate. Those things are complicated for me.
very.
Uh, right. So can you throw in a little of your knowledge for us on that?
Sure. Well, and actually, it's good that we mentioned copyright because when you're working as a voice actor, you don't own the copyright in the recordings that are made because the contract usually specifies it's a work made for hire, or you're working as a legitimate employee of the producer. And so the
Especially if
producer,
it's a buyout and they can do whatever they want with it at
yeah,
any
right.
time.
And they'll specify exactly that. We own it, it's ours, we do with it as we please. You can put restrictions in place even if they own the copyright. Yeah, you own it, but if you do
Hmm.
these things, you owe me more money, or if you do, you can't do these things with it. But copyright, normally, when someone just sits down and starts recording or painting a canvas with paint or sculpting a stone or writing a short story or whatever, the copyright springs into existence from the moment of creation, that moment that they set pen to paper, fix it in a tangible form of some sort. And so you own the copyright. That means that only you or someone you authorize is allowed to make, distribute, display, perform, and make derivatives from the original. Fair use is it's part of the law of the statute now, but when it started out, it was the courts had to deal with this problem of defendants in copyright infringement suits coming in and saying, hey, wait a minute, what about that First Amendment thing that says free speech? I'm allowed to do stuff. And both the copyright law and the First Amendment find their origins in the Constitution. So we have this inherent conflict. So
Hmm.
the courts had to develop an approach to keep both of them alive. And they set up this sort of complicated balancing test of 4 factors that you have to consider. And I'll go through them in a second. But over the course of most of the 20th century, the judges made the law and established what this fair use thing looks like as a defense against infringement cases. In 1976, when the Congress updated the copyright law, hard to believe it's already almost 60 years since they did that, or 50 years, sorry. They incorporated that and made it a part of the statute. So it's now in the code. And what it is, it says, look, certain kinds of uses, particularly educational, critical commentary, news, those kinds of things, when you use them in moderation, those will look like fair use. And they laid out these 4 factors. The first is the purpose and character of the new use, the alleged infringing use. Then you look at the nature of the original and ask the question, well, is it similar in nature, or is there a big transformation in what we're looking at here? The third factor is, of course, the amount and substantiality of what's been taken. And that's not just a quantitative, but also a qualitative substantiality. So you could take 4 bars of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and it would be the meat of it. I mean, if it was still protected by copyright, bum, 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 everybody, you took the hook, right?
Hmm.
So that's substantial, even though it's only 1 measure or 4 measures, whatever. And so that's the third factor, amount and substantiality. And then the fourth factor is, what kind of impact has this infringement taken or had on the market for or value of the original? So this is where you get all these misconceptions. Well, I'm allowed to use 30 seconds, or I can use 4 bars of the song, or I'm not making any money from it, so it's okay.
Right.
Those are all misconceptions.
Hmm.
I was going to,
Interesting.
yeah, I was going to use a more coarse BS kind of word.
Right. I'm not getting any money for it. That is, I think, what most people think. An example would be if you record
Mhm.
a play on stage at a community theater.
Yeah,
Even if even if it's a nonprofit,
yeah.
I don't think you can put that up on YouTube legally. Is that correct?
Legally, you're not even supposed to record it because that's making the
Exactly.
copy. And
Right.
it's not about whether you, the person making the recording, is not making any money from it, but now the playwright who wrote it as a part of how they make their living isn't making any money from it.
Then
So it's really
how can all those plays be on YouTube then? I've seen so many.
well, sometimes the authors do allow it. especially if it's not the whole thing, but a little piece.
Or community
Sometimes,
theater.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and sometimes there's for promotional uses and ads and things like that. And sometimes it's just, it's flying under the radar. And this whole copyright thing, especially with YouTube, it's a little bit like the game of whack-a-mole. It pops up and you got to hit it and get it out of there. At some point, just good old fatigue comes into play. And
Yeah.
does it really pay to go after every high school drama teacher who posts their production of Anything Goes on
Right.
YouTube?
Yeah. But technically it is illegal.
Yeah.
If they wanted to press it, they probably could.
Yeah. And in fact, the contracts are very explicit about this kind of thing. And I have seen play publishing companies basically, take a 3 strikes and you're out approach with schools and community theaters and just say, we're not licensing plays to you anymore because you consistently violate these rules.
Can podcasts be copyrighted?
Yes, because hey, when you press record on that computer or on that recording device, you are fixing your expression of ideas into a tangible form.
Mm-hmm.
You own a copyright in that episode the moment it is created.
Now, if you're recording on your end as well
Mm-hmm.
as me, can you also use it?
So this is an interesting issue that comes up a lot. I'm on a little bit of a crusade to tell hosts like you,
Mm-hmm.
when you have guests on your show, use a written release form.
Yes. Yes.
A podcast guest release.
Give that to me, and I'm so appreciative of it. And why don't you tell us now how people can get that? Because I think that you give that away.
Yes.
In this
it is my way of getting your email address. It's not giving it away. There's an exchange.
I get it. But you know what? In our industry, I'm just going to call it out, in the voiceover industry, everybody wants to sell something. Coaching, demos, half an hour on a webinar. Everybody wants to sell it. So the fact that I know you're giving it away to get something, but you're not charging for it, and it's invaluable. I think it's fantastic.
And as I said, I'm on this mission. I want to give people the tools, the knowledge, and the know-how to protect themselves. So podcastrelease.com will get you the form where you fill in your email address, and then I'll send you the thing. And what it does is it gives the podcaster consent from the other person to be recorded and to be used as a podcast or whatever else the podcaster wants to do. It says, I understand I don't have any rights of approval. I don't get to review it first and say yes or no. And I'm not going to get paid for being a guest on your show. And you can change that if you are paying or something like that. And most importantly, it says, and you are the owner of the copyright in this recording. Because when 2 people get together to create a single unified thing, the law says they are joint owners, joint authors of the work.
But
and
not
means,
in this situation.
Well, if you have a contract that says otherwise, you've articulated the intent, and that's what contracts are all about. Because
someone could come back later and say, no, you know what, I don't want that on YouTube, or I don't want that on Apple or whatever anymore.
And in the podcasting space, a podcaster might have invested a fair bit of time, energy, money, resources in making that episode happen. And now that money has gone to waste because the episode has now either never been published or been taken down. And if you have sponsors on your show and they're paying for those episodes, well, now you're in breach of contract because you're no longer providing that episode for the sponsor. Right. So it really is, this is the business side of this thing that a lot of people start as a hobby.
Well, it becomes a business. It is a business.
Well, I think they need to think of it as a business from the jump. Unfortunately, many don't. And then that's why they call the podcast lawyer to help them with a sticky situation. The other area that comes up a lot is just, if you're doing a podcast and you've got a co-host, well, you're getting married. You should have a prenup.
Yeah.
Who owns what? Who gets what if there's a breakup? Who gets the house? Who gets the kids?
Yeah, thank goodness I do this by myself. Well, Gordon Firemark, I just love your name. That's your real name?
It's my real name. It's one of those names that, when my great-great-grandpa, I jokingly call him Tevye, emigrated from the old country.
Yeah.
The immigration centers were overcrowded, and if they couldn't pronounce your name, they needed to move you through the line. So they gave you a new name.
Right.
So
well, you got a good one.
He had one son, and he had one son, and he had me, and I have 2 sons.
Great. So if they just Google Gordon Firemark, you'll come up, and all of your great books.
I'm all over the place.
And your knowledge. And you're in Los Angeles.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Gordon, I can't thank you enough. I've learned so much from you today, and I hope that the people watching or listening have too. Best of
Well, it's
luck to
been
you. Thank you so much.
thanks. It's been great talking to you, Bo. Thanks for having me.